Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy. Meccan Revelations, part 22. How's everybody doing? Hope you're doing well. Can you hear me? Our special guest today, here just off screen, Our Lady of Shillong, Meghalaya. Now, you might Google that and say that's not a real thing. However, after you've watched from the Edward Reeb Travels video, part 17, the most recent, just uploaded a couple weeks ago, called Shillong, then this will make a lot more sense, especially if you see the Chicken Philosophy episodes that are linked to in cards like this from the Shillong video, those being Teilhard de Chardin part 14, just that one pretty much, but also there's Martin Luther part 8. But really, for this to make sense, you only need to watch the Shillong travel video and Teilhard de Chardin part 14. So just as a reminder to check those out, we'll have her present throughout this Meccan Revelations episode right there. The magic of Editor Edward. Speaking of the magic of Editor Edward, would you play something upbeat? Nice. Very nice. So, gosh, you know how sometimes you ever get born in the middle of a ping pong match to parents who really weren't that into ping pong, but then they die, and then you're just surrounded by ping pong for, I don't know, 25 years or so. And then one day you get in a rocket ship and go out into space and live there, and you look back one day at the Earth and everybody's like, ping pong! Yeah, fucking ping pong! And then they're like, oh, space, yes, that relates to ping pong in this way. And, it's just kind of annoying and obnoxious. And you're kind of glad to be in space. And part of you kind of almost wants to cut out that little voice in your head that occasionally says, hey, why don't you look back to the ping pong game? You know people down there. You used to back in the day. Wonder how they're doing. They're down there. We're fucking ping pong. Anyway, so other than that, though, the image on the thumbnail, I've just decided, is of the first glass mosque in India, which we were able to see, I've mentioned it before, from our balcony where we were staying in Shillong. And so that's a picture of it. I didn't take the picture on the thumbnail, it's just a nice picture that I found. And that kind of fits with our theme. Now, normally, Revelations brings to mind for the average English-speaking person. You'll say, oh yeah, Revelations, the Apocalypse, last chapter of the Bible. You mean the book of Revelation, singular? Yeah. Colloquially known as Revelations. So this is Meccan Revelations. So, is this the Meccan version? This is the Muslim version of the end of the world? No. These are revelations which Ibn Arabi had when he was in Mecca, that he put down in words over the course of his life after he settled in Damascus. However, this particular part we're reading is actually about the end of the world, specifically the coming of the Messiah. So, for those of you who are into Dune, now, of course, It's like a little different from the Jewish Messiah and very different from the Christian Messiah in a number of ways. I don't actually know a whole lot about the Jewish Messiah. I think it has a lot more in common with the Jewish Messiah than the Christian one, obviously. So, anyway, now this is going to end. In fact, I mean, by that I mean we're going to have the end of the end of the end of the world, and then hopefully we can move on to something more enjoyable. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I'm trying to find diamonds in the rough. I'm trying to find, for one thing, becoming familiar with it. Basically, this book has been kind of in my shelf since 2006 or so. And I've always been meaning to get around to it. And things that I'm interested in enough to dive into, like if I actually have I want to read this, like Dune, or Foundation trilogy, or Heinlein, certain Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land, and what was that one with the star that disappeared, and then so they take a train to the other, Judas Unchained, and you might get the feeling, yeah, you're just listing a lot of sci-fi books. Yes, that's the thing, is when I honestly ask myself, what do I want to read? It's usually sci-fi. And then stuff like this I have in the shelf because I feel like I want to have read it, but I don't actually want to read it. So what I've decided to do is make a silly YouTube channel that I don't know who's going to watch, called Chicken Philosophy. And somewhere between try to make it so that nobody watches it and not care whether anybody watches it, kind of in that zone. And then sometimes this weird little weed will grow up where I care, and I stomp that out as quickly as I can. And then we read it together, you and I. And if anything pops into my head as I'm reading, I blurt it out. And I try not to be too disrespectful, usually. But I don't know, it is what it is. I'll go ahead and get to the reading, because the sooner I get to the reading, the sooner we'll be finished learning about the helpers of the Mahdi. Here we go. 6B. The role... Oh, sweet Jesus, the electricity came back. So, we're going to have a little bit of noise pollution today, which is really good news for me. And, yeah, for a moment, I'm going to go ahead and put it on high. So we're going to have the most noise pollution we've ever had on Chicken Philosophy from the air conditioner. And later, I'll go ahead and put it at a lower setting so that it's not quite so obnoxious. 6B, the role of the Mahdi, or rather the Imam. Oh, this, by the way, this is Chodkwicz. It's Chodkiewicz, which I assume is pronounced Chodkwicz. He's the translator. There's other translators. Oh, edited. He's the editor. Oh, and, well, anyway, William Chittick and James Morris, and edited by Michel, maybe, because there's only an E, not a A-E, and the French love them some, Muslim stuff, right? All of them, without exception. All French people love everything there is about Islam. That's a fact. Obviously, I'm joking, but they colonized a lot of Africa, so it's kind of their karma to have small villages under Sharia law. But anyway, in France, rural France, it's a thing. I don't know. Okay, so where were we? Unofficially, obviously. Coffee houses where women aren't allowed, that kind of thing. Anyway, so what's my point? This is italics, which means it's not Ibn Arabi translated into English. It's Chodkwicz.
that I'm reading right now. Rather, the Imam of the time, in quotes, with regard to, quote, the sensible forms of divine sustenance, end quote, concerns his unique divinely inspired ability, parentheses, resembling that of the prophet, end parentheses, to decide what material goods of this world should rightfully, quote, belong, end quote, to each believer. Again, communism, right? It's always communism, it seems. Since individuals can only be, at best, the temporary, quote, owners, end quote, parentheses, or more properly speaking, quote, custodians, end quote, end parentheses, of those earthly goods. Like my dad always said, you don't buy Sprite, you rent it. Quote, since everything in the world is divine sustenance and part of, quote within quotes, what God has left, and quote within quotes, the Imam judges with regard to, parentheses, allocating, end parentheses, it in accordance with the judgment God sends down to him concerning it, end quote. In the meanwhile, Ibn Arabi advises we should act, quote, according to the divine commandment, which the divinely prescribed law has conveyed to us, end quote, while abstaining from judgment in all other cases. All right, that's the end of the Michel Jodkowicz. Now, we're back to Ibn Arabi. 7. As for the, quote, knowledge of the interpenetration of things, end quote, 3 dots, that, bracket parentheses, I love me some bracket parentheses, reality, end bracket parentheses, inwardly penetrates and informs all the practical and intellectual crafts. Therefore, if the Imam knows this, he will not be bothered by doubt and uncertainty in his judgments. For this, bracket parentheses, precise inner awareness of the interpenetration of spiritual and manifest reality, and bracket parentheses, is the seal the scale, bracket parentheses, of divine justice, and bracket parentheses, in the world, both in sensible things and in the inner spiritual meanings. So, the rational, responsible person behaves according to that scale in both worlds, and indeed every manner where he has control over his actions. But as for those who judge in accordance with the divine inspiration that, bracket parentheses, God, and bracket parentheses, has sent down, those to whom, bracket parentheses, that inspiration, and bracket parentheses, has been delivered, among the, bracket parentheses, prophetic, and bracket parentheses, messengers with a capital M, and those like them, bracket parentheses, i.e. the saints, and bracket parentheses, you know them, Francis of Xavier. I'm only kidding. He's talking about different saints. I think Sufi saints. Anyway, they did not depart from, bracket parentheses, their inner awareness of, and bracket parentheses, this interpenetration, bracket parentheses, of spiritual and material being, and bracket parentheses. Thus God made them the receptacle, parentheses, of revelation, end parentheses, for that part of his judgment concerning his servants which he delivered to them. Bracket parentheses, as, and bracket parentheses, he said, quote, the faithful Spirit brought down, parentheses, the revelation, end parentheses, upon your heart, end quote, Quran 26, 193 through 194. And, quote, he sends down the angels with the Spirit from his command upon whomever he wishes among his servants, end quote, Quran 16:2. Now, just to be clear, that's me reciting the William Chittick and James Morris translation of Ibn Arabi, quoting the Quran, which is the words of
the Prophet Muhammad, blessed be he, which he's narrating or speaking after having heard them from the archangel Jibriel or Gabriel. So that's a lot of that's like, you know, you ever play telephone? I wonder what the angel actually said. For those who don't know, there's this old game called Telephone. Maybe it's not a thing anymore. Did Gen Z play telephone? Probably not. They probably wouldn't even understand. Like, you have a cell phone? No, maybe. I don't. I'm just playing with you, Gen Z. I'm also Gen X, XYZ, very close in numbers. Anyway, the point is, one person would say, you know, Harry met Sally, and they'd whisper it in the ear of the person next to him, and they'd be like, okay, Sally's very hairy. And then someone else would say, Harry and the Hendersons. I think that's what he said, right? You said Harry and the Hendersons? Yeah. And then, and so on and so forth. And then at the end of the line, they say, okay, what's the message? And they say, you know, World War II, Lovecraft, you know, or whatever. And then, oh no, it was Harry met Sally. So, yeah, so it is with translations of quotings of religion and angels and stuff. Maybe, I don't know, probably not. Sorry, I'll keep reading so that we can finish this section. Yes. Therefore, every judgment, bracket parentheses, or command, and bracket parentheses, concerning the world that is made manifest through a bracket parentheses divine and bracket parentheses messenger is the outcome of a, quote, spiritual marriage, end quote. Checkmate, Wilhelm, in the introduction to The Secret of the Golden Flower. Christianity isn't the only one with a spiritual marriage, and it's a very obscure little passage buried somewhere in the middle of, oh, well, there's the Songs of Solomon, of course, Song of Songs, and then there's that wedding in the book of John, which is probably Jesus' wedding to Mary Magdalene, as we all know. He was saying that because this Taoist alchemical book was talking about spiritual marriage, that it must be influenced by Christianity, because obviously, where else are they going to get the idea of spiritual marriage? Wilhelm. Those 1929 Germans sure have a Western-centric perception of reality, don't they? I mean, for his time, he was actually one of the ones that was, like, outside. But looking back, it's like 100 years ago, people who were, like, nonconformist are still going to be 98% banana, right? In their DNA. I'll just keep reading. Yes. This, bracket parentheses, essential spiritual inspiration underlying the judgment, and bracket parentheses, is not the textual indications and not in those who judge on the basis of analogy. Hence, it is incumbent on the imam that he know what is, bracket parentheses, learned, and bracket parentheses, through being sent down by God, bracket parentheses, through divine inspiration, and bracket parentheses, and what is, bracket parentheses, ordinarily supposed, and bracket parentheses, through analogy. However, the Mahdi does not know this. I mean the knowledge acquired by analogy, in order to pass judgment according to it, but only so that he can avoid it. And avoid is in italics, and after the it, there is an exclamation point. So this is like really emphasized. Okay. For the Mahdi only judges according to what the angel delivers to him from what is with God, Quran 289, etc. Bracket parentheses, the inspiration, and bracket parentheses, God has sent him in order to guide him rightly. Yeah, you gotta know the analogies so that you can say, hey, this ain't no analogy here.
So that is the true Muhammadan Shar, the one such that Muhammad, if he were alive, bracket parentheses, on earth, end bracket parentheses, and that particular case were presented to him, would pass judgment on it in exactly the same way as this Imam. For God will teach him, bracket parentheses, by inspiration, and bracket parentheses, that this is the Muhammadan Shar. Remember when the editor was talking about how Muhammadan really just means universal, and it's like Ibn Arabi's way of getting away with saying some stuff is to say it's Muhammadan, but he really means universal? Anyway, and will therefore forbid him, bracket parentheses, to follow judgments arrived at by, and bracket parentheses, analogical reasoning, despite the existence of the textual indications God has bestowed on him. And this is why God's messenger said, in describing the Mahdi, that, quote, he follows in the trace of my footsteps, and he makes no mistake. End quote. Through this, he informed us that, bracket parentheses, the Mahdi, and bracket parentheses, is a follower, bracket parentheses, of the Prophet, and bracket parentheses. Not one who is followed, bracket parentheses, i.e. not a messenger with a new revealed law, end bracket parentheses, and that he is, bracket parentheses, divinely, end bracket parentheses, protected from error. Since only, bracket parentheses, possible, since the only, bracket parentheses, possible, end bracket parentheses, meaning of someone's being protected from error as they do not make mistakes. Yeah. Good analogy. Right. Thus, if the messenger, i.e. Muhammad, end bracket parentheses, pronounced a judgment, bracket parentheses, in some matter, end bracket parentheses, no mistake is ascribed to him, since, quote, he does not speak from passion, but it is only an inspiration, inspired in him, end quote, Quran 53, 3-4, and likewise analogical reasoning is not permissible in a place where the messenger is to be found. Now the prophet does exist and is to be found, bracket parentheses, here and now, and bracket parentheses, with the people of unveiling, and therefore they only take their, bracket parentheses, inspired understanding of the appropriate divine, end bracket parentheses, judgment from him. This is the reason why the truthful and sincere fakir, F-A-Q-I-R, before you at me, it's the English phonetic transliteration of an Arabic word. Fakir. Just to be clear, I'm not using any profanity here, YouTube. Don't flag this video. Okay, just want to be extra clear about that. Doesn't depend on any, bracket parentheses, legal, end bracket parentheses, school. He is with the messenger, bracket parentheses, i.e. Muhammad, end bracket parentheses, alone, whom he directly witnesses, just as the messenger is with the divine inspiration that is sent down to him. Thus, the notification of the, bracket parentheses, appropriate divine, end bracket parentheses, judgment concerning the particular events and cases is sent down from God to the hearts of the truthful and sincere true knowers, bracket parentheses, informing them, and bracket parentheses, that this is the judgment of the Shar that was sent with the messenger of God. Now, is the messenger of God Jibreel or the prophet? I assume it's the prophet. Those adhering to knowledge of the external forms, bracket parentheses, of religious tradition, are we going to get subtly subversive? Very subtly subversive? 12th century Syrian
version of very subtly subversive here, Mr. Arabi? I think we are.
And bracket parentheses. Do not have this, bracket parentheses, spiritual and bracket parentheses, rank because of their having devoted themselves to their love for, bracket parentheses, prominent social and bracket parentheses position, the domination of others, bracket parentheses, furthering and bracket parentheses, their precedence over God's servants, and, bracket parentheses, ensuring that, and bracket parentheses, the common people need them. Hence, they do not prosper, Quran 16:16, with regard to their souls, nor shall one prosper through bracket parentheses following and bracket parentheses them.
Take that, Pharisees. Wait a minute. Wrong Messiah. Okay. A little bit of overlap, though, at least in Ibn Arabi's explanation.
Okay. This is the bracket parentheses inner and bracket parentheses condition of the jurists of bracket parentheses hour and bracket parentheses time. Those who desire... I know what you're thinking. No, I don't. You're not thinking this. I am.
Wouldn't it be silly to say, isn't it a coincidence that both Dune and Star Wars involve a desert planet? Wild coincidence that. That would be silly. Not saying that. You're thinking it. I'm not saying it. I didn't say anything.
All right. Never mind. This is the bracket parentheses inner condition, inner and bracket parentheses of the jurists of bracket parentheses hour and bracket parentheses time. Those who desire to be appointed to posts as judges, notaries, inspectors, or professors. As for those of them,
scribes and...
as for those of them who cunningly hide themselves in bracket parentheses the guise of and bracket parentheses religion, those who hunch their shoulders and look at people furtively with a pretense of humility. Why does this sound familiar from other places? Who move their lips as though in dicker.
How does one move their lips as though in... yeah, no, it's an interesting thing how what Jesus said about the Pharisees can also be said about people who treat the religion that was established based on the teachings of Jesus the same way the Pharisees treated their tradition, and the same way that these people that he's describing seem to be treating their tradition. And the critic of it is always someone like Jesus or Ibn Arabi, kind of, I won't say putting words in the mouth of the Mahdi, but interpreting what the Mahdi would say if he were here, kind of thing. Maybe based on the Quran. I don't know. I haven't read the Quran, I must confess. Forgive me. I have sinned. I haven't read the Quran. How many Hail Marys?
Sorry, I'll continue. Where were we? Those who move their shoulders, so that the person looking at them will know they are performing dicker. Who speak obscurely and in an effect... That's
DHIKR. Again, YouTube, don't flag me.
Who speak in an affected manner. They are dominated by the weakness of the carnal self. And, quote, their hearts are the hearts of wolves.
Wearing the clothing of...
bracket parentheses, so that end bracket parentheses, God does not, bracket parentheses, speak to them. Nor, and bracket parentheses, look at them, Quran 377 through 78. This is the condition of those among them who make a show of religion, not those who are the companions of Satan. Quran 4:38 and 43:36. Shatem or whatever. That's the English translation. So what can we do? These, bracket parentheses, outwardly pious hypocrites, and bracket parentheses, quote, dressed up for the people in the skins
of gentle sheep,
end quote, bracket parentheses, they are, end bracket parentheses, brothers outwardly and enemies inwardly
and secretly. Oh, been there. Been there. A brother outwardly and an enemy secretly. I mean, I've been that guy, but in a different context. The guy wasn't the Mahdi. But he thought he was.
Where were we? Yes, the voices in his head certainly thought so too. Okay, yes. So, but God will examine them and take them by their forelocks.
I can only imagine what a forelock is. Isn't there an angel forelock? Anyway, maybe it's like their hair or something. Hopefully on their head.
And, Quran 55, 41, 96,
15 through 16, and other numbers.
And, no other numbers. To that, bracket parentheses, level of hell, end bracket parentheses, which constrains their happiness, as hell tends to do. Thus, when the Mahdi comes forth, bracket parentheses, to establish justice in the world, and bracket parentheses, he has no enemy,
Quran 188, etc.
Except for the jurists in particular.
Those jurists, am I right?
For then they will no longer have any power of domination and will not...
Those dominating jurists, fucking democracy, my God. The judicial system, peers, jury of your peers. Pfft, just bring in the Messiah. Have him tell everyone whether they fucked Stormy Daniels or not. I don't know.
Okay, where were we? For then they will no longer have any power, yes, of domination and will not be distinguished from the mass of common people.
I'm kidding, by the way.
Never mind. And they will only keep a slight knowledge of, bracket parentheses, the divine, and bracket parentheses, commandment, since the differences concerning the commandments will be eliminated in this world because of the existence
of this Imam. See, I'm being respectful.
However, if the Mahdi did not have the sword, bracket parentheses, of worldly authority, and bracket parentheses, in his hand, then the jurists would all deliver legal opinions, bracket parentheses, demanding, and bracket parentheses, that he be killed. Keep going. But instead, bracket parentheses, as stated in the Hadith, and bracket parentheses, quote, God will bring him forth with the sword and noble character, end bracket parentheses, and they will be greedy, bracket parentheses, for his support, end bracket parentheses, and fearful, so that they will, bracket parentheses, outwardly, end bracket parentheses, accept his judgment without having any faith in it. Indeed, they will grudgingly conceal their disagreement, just as do, bracket parentheses, the two legal schools of, end bracket parentheses, the Hanafites and the Shafi'ites. What? Concerning those matters where they disagree. I think I understand now. For the MAGA hat wearers, you've got the wrong Messiah. You're Christian. This is the guy that you think it's the wrong one. It's the wrong one. Read your Bible, man. You don't need to. They do. Just the last eighth of it. Ignore the first 7/8 with the Canaan walls of Jericho and all that. It's just skip that part and get to the. Sorry, I'm just being silly today. A little bit silly. For in fact it has been reported to us that the followers of these two schools in the lands of the non-Arabs, bracket parentheses, i.e. Iran, and Transoxiana. What? And bracket parentheses, this is 800 years ago. Iran's still there, but Transoxiana and bracket parentheses are constantly fighting one another, and that a great many people of both groups have died. That, bracket parentheses, they go to such extremes that, and bracket parentheses, they even break the fast during the month of Ramadan in order to be stronger for their battles. Yeah, I was reflecting on the people that end up on the currency of various nations. And, you got your mass murderers over here, you got your perverts over there, and then in America, you've got George Washington. Had no respect for the sanctity of Christmas. Before he came around, you could take Christmas off from your war if you were fighting. If it was one group of Christians fighting another group of Christians, and they were both on the Roman calendar. You could take the day off. You could even go into no man's land and sing. Okay, that came later. The whole World War I Doctor Who thing. Never mind. Yes. They're battles. Okay. I was hoping that we'd finish today, but we'll finish eventually, this section. Because, again, I don't think I pointed in the beginning. You can check out the earlier parts. It's like it starts out real cool, reality and non-reality, self and non-self, God and creation, the universe and the individual and God, and here's how they're connected, and the stars and the strata and the planets and the angels and the jinn, and you're like, wow, man, this is cool stuff. And then you get about this far in, and it's like, okay, here's how our apocalypse prophecy Messiah guy is going to be. Sharia law! And it's like, are you going to keep being like this, or are you going to go back to how you were at the beginning of the book? Is this just what we're going to do now? It's kind of like familiar from the cult I was in. It starts out like, wow, it's all about finding the center between these, in all things there are two opposing forces, and you must be the reconciler between them, and unbalanced mercy is weakness, and unbalanced severity is cruelty, and and all this kind of like really abstract kind of, and that's the Osiris god, and then as you work your way up through the grades, it's like, okay, welcome to the body of Christ. The whole universe is Christ, and you're going to become part of its body, but only after we strap you to the cross and whip you and all that, and put you in a box and stuff. It's like, how come Neophyte was so much cooler than Adeptus? And how come the very beginning of this book was so much cooler than partway in? But I'm going to keep reading, because that's what we do here on Chicken Philosophy, is we read the books all the way through to the end. Where when I was, like in 2006, when I first started reading this, I have little notes in the margins. You can see my little notes in the margins comparing this stuff to like Golden Dawn Paradigm. And then at a certain point, once it started to get a little bit like
leaning toward like, now we're going to get a little bit more kind of religiously dogmatic. I was like, I'm just going to pretend that the first this much is all he said. And I'm going to sing his praises and talk about how great Ibn Arabi is for years and years and years, until one day when I'm in India as an old man, you've seen my long gray beard, I'm going to actually read it live, and there'll be no denying that it gets kind of lame partway through, but I'm going to persist through the lameness. The only way out is through. Even if it's consistently lame through the entire rest of this book and the second volume, which I don't think it will be. I think it will get cool again. And in the meanwhile, maybe it's entertaining, at least a little, watching my reaction to it. Maybe not. If you're still watching, you're either hate watching, or you left it on accidentally, or whatever. You've got 3 screens going, and this just happens to be one of them. Or, on some level, you enjoyed or got something out of it. Maybe. I don't know. But if you did, then don't forget to do that shit. And feel free to follow me on these platforms. For the audio-only folk, you're like, what? Huh? I was talking to the YouTube thing. They're seeing something on the screen right now. Don't worry about it. Okay, I would like to thank Our Lady of Shillong for your presence today. And I will go ahead and put like a nice big link at the end for you to click on after you see the chicken, which comes after I say